The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin of Gosselin Martin Associates. As always, thank you for tuning into this episode. I am on site today in Burlington, Massachusetts. I am in the office of Paul Cantrell. Paul is the Vice President of Planning, Design, and Construction for Beth Israel Lahey Health in Massachusetts. Paul, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Peter. I'm in charge of planning, design, and construction in the healthcare world. A change from what my prior career was, which was the maritime world, and building ships, et cetera, and operating ships around the world into healthcare. We ended up, I made a pretty big transition from being away from the family for half of a year to being there full time. And I had to break my wife into how to contend with me over those period of time.
Paul is a great guy. I've been trying to get him on to the network for a while. Was happy the timing worked out. Paul just actually came back from a nice vacation. What did you do, Paul, on your vacation?
We actually went on a motorcycle ride. That's probably there was about 10 of us that flew into New Mexico. Went from Albuquerque down to Big Bend, Texas, and over to Arizona. That's my drug of choice. That's my pill that I can take where I don't think about work, and it just completely work completely leaves me while I'm riding bike. Fabulous 8 days.
So you actually hit on something there, talking about kind of getting away. And we'll get into kind of the pressures of working in a hospital, but stress relievers are really important. As you know, you're VP level and you've worked in stressful industries. So to get away, to unstress, is that what you do? You ride? Are there other things you do to kind of escape the pressure of work?
It used to be alcohol, but that didn't work out well for me, which is why I don't drink anymore. But no, it's actually that is. I will say that it doesn't matter if I'm going out on an hour's ride around home, but I can actually just turn the music on and take off, and that is it's a huge stress reliever for me.
Yeah. What is now? I know you've gone on a lot of bike trips across the country. Do you have a favorite bike trip you've taken?
I don't know. There's been so many great ones. It's certainly I love being out in the Midwest. There's just too many.
The Midwest because it's flat and you can see?
No, it's because of colors. And it's just a different, on this side of the Mississippi, it's just so much different than the West. And it's all open air. You get to ride through the mountains without traffic, and as opposed to riding through New England and trying to manage your way through traffic, weaving in and out. It's more of an open freestyle type of motorcycle. So.
Yep. That was one of the reasons I wanted to go out to college in the Midwest. I love New England. I love where we live, but it's good to get away and see a different part of the country.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, not everything's like here. You don't want everything the same. So I didn't have Paul on to talk about motorcycles, but since he just came back from his vacation, thought we could start there. Also, as he alluded to, you started in maritime industry and you transitioned over. What year did you transition to healthcare? It was at Spalding, right? Spalding Rehab.
I did the Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital. It was, I think it was 2005.
So 05. So you've been in healthcare for roughly 19 years now.
Yeah.
Spalding Rehab, if you've ever been to the Boston Garden or to the TD, whatever they're calling it now, right behind the garden is where Paul started in his career. But let's start with your maritime experience. What did you do and where did you go prior to joining healthcare? What was that experience?
Well, when I first graduated, I ended up working on ships. I started out as third engineer.
Did you go to Mass Maritime?
I went to Mass Maritime Academy, and was third engineer. I remember getting on my first ship. It was actually a Sea Train Washington. It was a steam turbine ship, and it was I think it was probably around 20,000 horsepower. And being on there, it was actually just I couldn't believe that this was an operable ship. We were supposed to be making a trip from New York to Europe, and there was so many exhaust leaks. I just was like, Jesus, is this the way it's supposed to smell down here? And boilers just leaked like a sieve. At least from the exhaust side, you'd have to go in, you'd grab a rag, wet it, and you'd throw it over your face, and you'd have to. If you had to go open up a valve or close a valve, there would be somewhere up around the boilers. But the boilers are the size of your house. They're not a small boiler. It's, it's 3 stories high, 4 stories high. And you'd have to run up these ladders that are all piping hot because within the engine room, it's about 110, 120 degrees. And you'd have to have a rag over your face just because you couldn't breathe. You really couldn't breathe. Let's say you had to open up your superheated, drain line vent or superheated vent line. It's just a valve, but it's up near the top of the boiler, so it was an effort. Anyway, from there it ended up. I get onto another ship and started in There were actually newer ships. There were actually diesel ships, but they say diesel, but they actually operated. They ran on heavy fuel, and that was as opposed to the Sea Train Washington. That was a steam turbine ship, but that was a DC ship. So everything on the ship was DC. When we went to, it was actually the Zapata Rover. It was actually an AC ship, so it actually had generators that produced AC power. The main engines were about 14,000 horsepower, and it was an oil tanker. And then we started going around the world in that, and then that became my career. I think the first time I went to sea, I was out for 9 months.
Wow. What's it like being out to sea for 9 months?
Just like going to work every day, and you kind of forget about it. Then it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I had a girlfriend. I wonder if she's still there. But lucky for me, she was. She was a little uncertain. She's like, wait a minute, I thought you were coming home. But anyway, it was a great time. Fabulous experience. A lot of responsibility that you got at a very young age. Certainly from and I love tearing into anything and everything. I wanted to be in it. I wanted to tear apart the pumps when they had to come apart, or main engines, or generators. And I was never that kid that, I was not a motorhead. I don't even know how I made the connection. I made the connection to go to Mass Maritime because I knew my strengths were engineering and science. Those were like straight A's for me. Wow. They were easy.
Yeah.
Where I struggled with the interpretation of, let's say, an English book or a history book.
It's funny the way the mind's wired that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I couldn't do any of that. The engineering, the science, the math, horrific.
But that was like flashcards to me.
Yeah.
But what you interpreted from a book and what I interpreted from the book, I can condense it into, probably less than a page. My wife would do a 17-page paper, and I'd sit there as we were, as we were going. She went to BC, and I would be there, and I'd think about it, and I'd have it in kind of in bullet points, a very condensed version of what I took away from the book. She's got 17 to 20 pages, and I was like, how the heck did you write this much about a book? But it's just, and I guess that was the earlier days of showing, our differences.
Yeah.
I guess that's just how my brain works.
So how long were you in the maritime field, and you worked your way up from the engine room to where?
So I ended up I was on basically a very accelerated grade. I just turned 28, and then I took over as chief engineer, and still doing around the world trips.
How often do you
So-
route? How often do you go around the world? Like, how long are you shoreside before they send you back? Is there a length?
It
of
was
stay?
like 4 months on, 4 months off.
Okay.
If you were going around the world, if I was doing a coastwise run, it would be 2 months on, 2 months off. Because if you're on coastwise, let's say, on a tanker, you would come into port, and you're basically doing a lot of maneuvering. You have to. So with maneuvering, the captain has to be on the bridge. I have to be in the control room. Through the entire maneuvering procedures. That's within like restricted waters, right? As you're coming into a port, and then until you make it to the dock, and so it really truly interrupts your patterns of sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless them. I know that a lot of the other crew members used to be able to just go in, drop on the bed, and fall right asleep, but I couldn't. If it was daytime, I just couldn't go to sleep. I could, when I had originally started to do that, it would be like I'd lay in bed. I'd be in bed 3 to 4 hours, and then finally I'd get up pissed off
Oh, that's
that
a
I didn't
terrible feeling.
sleep.
Yeah.
And then, I'd end up having to do a maneuver, let's say from 10 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning. Well, then it's 7 in the morning.
Wow. How'd you do it?
I just would go without it. I would just have another couple of cups of coffee, and
What's
I
the
would
longest?
wait until about 9 o'clock that night, and then I would crash.
What's the longest you ever went without sleep?
About 3 days. And actually, those 3 days were, I can tell you that. I can tell you a sea story on that one. It's a long sea story.
So one last sea story question, or one of the last. As a weather nerd, I love the weather. What is the worst storm? Is there a storm or two, or a hurricane, a typhoon, if you were over on the other side? Any weather story that sticks out to you where you were like, we're in trouble, or I got to get out of this, or I can't believe I'm in this?
I think there's a number of hurricanes that we were in, and I would say that one of them was it was on a cargo ship, and I think we were going across the Mediterranean, and we were in a hurricane, and I was in my office, and of course, you have to picture when you're on the ship, the ship is going like this, back and forth, back and forth. So my legs would be kind of pushed out. I would be at my desk, and with my legs pretty far spread out, and then I'd be at at my desk either writing something down or I'd be typing. And now we've screwed the computers down and pretty much everything else. And you have to think of it in terms of maybe sitting there. What this would be like is if you were sitting there in your own home, in your own living room, and then seeing everything in your living room just go from one side to another. That's an experience that I have had because we've been lulled into a lot of calm seas, and next thing you know, without any notice by anybody saying, "Hey, guess what? Heads up, guys, we're going to be getting into some tough seas." So anyway, just think about what your living room might look like when it ends up everything on one wall, and then within 30 seconds it's back over here, including seeing your couch, your chairs, and everything else. But that particular night, I remember going out. The captain comes in my office and he says, "Hey, come on out here. I want to show you something." So we went down to the main deck, and we stopped by somewhere on the main. No, we didn't go to the main deck. We went out to the stern, and he walks out and he said, and it's pitch black, and the ship is rolling and yarring, and so he stepped out and he grabbed the head, and he says, "Here." He gives me a flashlight. He says, "Find the top of the wave." And so I took the flashlight and I looked up, and it was basically a wave that was probably another 20 feet over my head, over where we were standing, and I was already 3 levels up. And I just said, Jimmy, you didn't need to show me. Thank you very much. Here's the flashlight. We just went back in.
So he brought you out there just so you could locate the top of the
Exactly.
There's nowhere to go. There's nothing you can
There's nothing to do.
I was reading Paul Lake's history. So I was reading, there's I've said this before, a 3-trilogy book by a guy named Ian Toll about the war in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And the final episode 3, or part 3, they talk about the Pacific Fleet. And you don't think of it because it's the U.S. Navy, but if you go back to 1945, when they were making their way up to Japan, getting caught in 2 typhoons that just racked them, and how Halsey was in command of the Pacific Fleet at the time. It was during one of those rotations. Halsey and McCain's dad.
Yeah.
And how they were thinking, Nimitz was actually thinking of potentially removing them because they were just caught completely off guard by it. And they talk about the destroyers getting just destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
And the aircraft carriers. So you don't think of that, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't have the rate. I mean, it wasn't like it is today technologically. But even with technology, you can still get surprised out on the water.
Oh yeah. You don't know that that's coming because
Right.
nobody can tell you.
Right.
If that one of those rogue waves comes along. I mean, it's happened, and it can kick up. Even the weather, you look out, and we were all trained as young officers to be able to watch the weather. But now with technology, you have the ability. Certainly these days.
Yeah.
I mean, back when we were still when I was going to sea, they were still navigating by stars, and by the time I left, we had the GPSs in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do we even need you bus drivers here?
Right. Man, that's crazy to go from you come in, it's celestial navigation,
Yeah.
to you depart and it's
Correct.
GPS. What a difference, huh?
I know.
I mean, crazy.
And all the radars and everything. Everybody's being tracked.
Yeah.
Now you've not only taken just the radars, you now have GPS, but GPS is picking it up.
Yeah.
It's like a more sophisticated radar.
So how did you transition into healthcare?
Actually, it was fast. I was looking around. Where would I fit? How do I fit in?
Had you retired from maritime, or were you still
Oh no,
out to sea and just trying? I want to get into.
no. I had plenty of bills. Don't worry about it. And I was the perfect seaman. I knew how to spend money, irresponsibly. But I tried to prepare myself. I had actually gotten and become part of a group called Association of Facility Engineers, where at least there I could kind of see where there was other businesses. Okay, maybe at a manufacturing plant, or maybe there was a production plant, or maybe I could run a power plant. And I started to look at that into some of those things, but I just never
Right.
saw a lot of those job opportunities where I may be able to fit in it. And I was still nervous about how am I going to get this? How am I going to get an introduction? Certainly, when somebody says, "Oh yeah, well, this guy's on ships. What the hell does that got to do with this?" We're in manufacturing. We make widgets. Well, I'm sure that I could do that, but we have to follow. And same thing happened when so what actually happened? My youngest sister had actually had a friend who was the COO of one of a hospital in the partner system, and she said, "Why don't you talk to him? He transitioned from the military, and he came out, and he's in healthcare, and just go talk to him." So she set up a meeting with him,
Wow.
and it was through that meeting, he saw that I had somewhat of a brain, and I could probably fit into something. It's as opposed to, and I guess I could kind of tell you a little bit about it afterwards, but when he started to introduce me, he says, "Let me set up a couple of just informational meetings with, some other directors within the system." And it was fascinating to understand it, and I was like, this really does make sense to me. It's a 24/7 operation. It's someplace where there's emergencies and they're going to need you urgently.
Yeah.
There's complicated systems, and they're a lot less complicated than some of the things that we were dealing with and some of the systems that we had. But there's an urgency to everything that is there. And there's many people that actually have hands-on to these things, so that the challenges are all there. And then I said, wow, I think this may be a fit for me. Luckily, a door opened, and somebody saw the worthiness of looking a little bit further than what my resume said, which is I float on water, right? That, hey, this guy might be somebody that understands our predicament with having to operate, ORs, et cetera, or pressure relationships and codes and understand codes.
Yeah. And there's two things that Paul said in that response that I think are important. One's for job seekers, and one is for human resources departments. I think the first thing is Paul talked about doing the informational interviews, and that's how I ended up here with Jack, is through informationally interviewing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because we had used him at Stewart when I was at Stewart Healthcare, but talking to those guys who had known him a little bit more, and ultimately I got to Jack. I never thought I'd be doing this, but it was interesting, and I would say, if you're a person thinking about changing careers, or you're thinking, okay, I want to go from facility operations to planning, design, construction, or you want to go from ops to EOC, do some informational interviewing, because I found it extremely helpful. And everybody's really willing to talk to you, especially if they know you don't want a job. Like, they'll tell you what they do and how they do it. And I don't know, I thought the informational interview was really, it's an effective tool to use to get to a job. You can even do a different industry. And then I think the second thing Paul said was relative to his resume. And when we work with HR departments all the time, you can't just go by a piece of paper, right? Especially these days. I mean, your background was perfect for healthcare, right? But if somebody didn't take the time to talk to you, are they going to know that off of the resume? Probably
no,
not.
I think you are 100% right, because it's certainly from where I was and how I viewed my own job. I'm an engineer, and this is what I do. I do engineering.
Yeah.
And you would think in terms of, oh, listen, it's based on the amount of chief engineer's licenses that I have. Oh, that's important. I've got 3 chief engineer's licenses. Oh, okay. Well, wait a minute. And how many horsepower? Oh, it's unlimited horsepower. And what's the maximum amount? Well, that's got no relevance, for sure. And so somebody's reading that, so okay, we're going to take that and push it off. I didn't realize that until later, but it's because of our own mentalities, is that we're so deep into our own. Well, it's over 20 years of a career.
Yeah.
So that's all I thought of, and that's the only way that I could think, as opposed to number one, how do I fit into this?
Yeah.
Or how would somebody else perceive me? But to me, to your point, I thought it was a perfect fit. Certainly, with the amount of things that are going on within healthcare, to challenge me enough that I would be, want to be here every day because there's something new. And when I did make that decision to move, one was certainly driven because of my wife. And I was like, it's time for you to get ashore. And I said, okay, honey. But I had already exhausted everything that I've done everything that you could do by going, when I went to sea. And I had offers to take some pretty good jobs, but in shipyards and rebuilding ships. I was like, it's the last thing I want to do. I've done this.
Yeah.
I want out. I want something that's going to be, new, refreshing, and challenge. Something that's going to challenge me. And certainly found it this way. And certainly, it's okay. There's a new set of rules. We all operate by rules, and certainly in a tanker world, it's a highly regulated world with a number of people that have eyes on you at all times to find out if you violate something. But it's been a fabulous transition, and certainly, I don't even know how you say, how do you get that door cracked open for somebody to look at you?
Yeah.
And, I think maybe, certainly with you, because you're more of a specialty in the services that you offer, where we're just facilities people. But how do we bridge that from here to the C-suite. And I think that's probably a connection that needs to be made. And
talking about that kind of skills, so you had obviously you had the technical skills, but you said you came from working in a ship environment, and now you're into an environment where you need kind of the soft skills, the communicative. The technical is not enough anymore. Now you got to interact with doctors, patients. It's very difficult, very different environment than what you were in. How was that transition? Kind of the learning, learning the hospital environment, and then coming out of a ship where I'm sure you say whatever is on your mind because nobody's feelings are getting hurt, and if they're getting hurt, you got to get over it because you're out on the water. What was that transition like coming into an environment of a hospital environment where it's very different? And how long did it take?
I would say I was very fortunate by the person that did hire me. We connected, right away, and certainly made it comfortable to be as frank as I am or can be.
You're honest.
Yeah. I consider my job, and certainly probably because it was, hey, this was it's a quasi military, profile as far as the way that the organizations are built on the ship. So okay, I need to communicate. It's my job to make sure that I convey this information, and that's how I always interpret it. It's like, all right, I'll bring the information forward. I may not have all the answers, and certainly, but I need to make you aware of it, so that you can help make critical decisions. And that's what my expectations are, certainly from my staff, to get me the information, so that helps me make that decision or make that final decision with input from them. But I think with the first person that actually hired me, it kind of allowed that. And certainly as I started to convey information to senior leadership, even the COO and CEO, who after he left, that's who I had ended up reporting to, would be directly to them. But I had to tell the truth, and I had to alert them to what risks were out here. And we've got Band-Aids all over this place. I need help, but that help is a financial dollar. This also helped advocate for the Spalding to ask for the new Spalding, was what state that it was in.
Okay.
But actually, we did design the design of the whole new building, of the whole new hospital, with the exception of final finishing. And then at the time there was a different movement. They slowed down for about a year and a half. We basically took the plans and moved it in the back, and then but by that time I wanted to get into acute care hospital, which was
there you are.
fabulous. So, but anyway, it was I was allowed to go ahead and be as frank as I could. That's just a natural thing, a natural progression that actually happens when you went to sea. I had to really truly clean that up, but because it just becomes part of your vocabulary.
We'll cut that one for this
Okay.
one. Just the word though, I love the whole thing. So if you hear it blank, you're not going to know what it is, but if you want to know, just email me and I'll tell you. Just joking. So yeah, though, was that a tough change? I mean, you're an honest guy. You kind of tell it like it is. Did you have to catch yourself coming in when you're working with doctors, nurses? Did you tailor that style a bit?
Oh, it definitely had to, because I didn't, because I think maybe it was just me, the way that I grew up. I was like, oh, wait a minute, you're a doctor? I don't know if there's, it's
Yeah.
almost godlike.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't.
Yeah.
And they walked in their own path, and we didn't walk with them. And that was intimidating.
Yeah.
In different languages, it's almost like you must speak French. I don't know how to speak that. So.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I need to make the connection, because what you certainly have found was that we're all competing for the same dollars. And when we ended up getting around, and here's all the leaders around the table, the criteria that the hospitals had made for making those selections were immediate life safety. Okay, we have to get that. All right. This is patient safety. This is if this is going to touch the patient, this has an immediate impact. Is this going to end up getting better scores for the hospital? What's this impact? And then another one would be regulatory. It was like, well, wait a minute. By that ranking system, I'm never going to make it anywhere.
Right.
I need to get equipment. I've got 35, 40-year-old air handler units. Their life cycle is only 20 to 25 years. I've got 40, 45 years. How do I get this? I need that same money. How do we get to this place? I've got a building automation system that says, okay, it's automated, but it's a pneumatic system. It sends a signal out. We don't know if if that signal ever makes it to its destination. Of a 1.2 million square foot building.
Yeah.
So I needed to start to tell a story, or put together a story with enough of information of what the state of the hospital actually was. Was in X, as I come into it, and this isn't. Because to me, this was a natural thing for me to do as an engineer. Because when I would fly out, I'd fly to a ship, and I'd never seen it before. But my expectation, it was the expectation that I run the ship for that. It could be in a matter of hours, but from that moment on, I'm actually assessing what else has to get done, where else in the life cycles, and certainly from a mechanical perspective or an engineering perspective, we stay more on track as far as equipment replacement or overhaul or normally we would rebuild it. But if it has to get replaced, it gets replaced, and you need to prioritize that and get that information back to the home office. But here, the home office is C-suite.
Right.
So,
Right. So
This concludes episode 1. Please return to the Healthcare Facilities Network in the near future to view episode 2. And as always, thank you for watching.